Antibiotics are almost impossible to avoid in today's world. They're thrown around kind of like candy, and they're even harder to avoid if you're already diagnosed with some kind of digestive condition like IBS or IBD, and they are so extremely damaging. And so today, you're gonna know why they're damaging you, and of course, what you can do to repair that damage. You're gonna learn some pretty amazing and sometimes horrifying facts, things that your doctor should have actually told you before prescribing them. I'm going to show you what parts of your body are being damaged from these antibiotics, what you can do to protect yourself from future damage while using them, how to recover from antibiotic damage, and of course, we're going to go through some natural antibiotic substitutes that are extremely powerful, often better off without the negative side effects. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Josh Deck. I'm an IBD specialist, medical lecturer, physician's consultant, and the scientific strategist for the Root Cause for Crohn's Colitis organization. And today we are talking about repairing the damage that's been done to you from antibiotics. Before we talk about antibiotics, I'm not downing them per se. Sometimes they are incredibly life-saving. We need them much of the time. If you're dying with an infection, get the antibiotics. Take care of the damage later. But according to, and this is data you can look up, according to the CDC, some arguments are up to 40% of all antibiotic prescriptions are unnecessary, meaning they did not have to be given, recommended, or prescribed in the first place. And when we're doing tens of millions of prescriptions every single year, there are tens of millions of people out there taking antibiotics that don't actually need them. We're going to see antibiotics prescribed for all kinds of things. We see them prescribed for things like viruses. We see them prescribed like a flu, things that aren't actually responsive to antibiotics, even like a viral bronchitis. Right? Some irritation, inflammation in the lungs, the bronchioles go into the lungs. You don't need antibiotics, but we give them anyway. Or we also see them as what's called, I'll put up here, defensive medicine. And what this means is, well, let's give them just in case. We don't really know what's going on, or we don't have the diagnostic criteria. We can't say it's an infection or not, but let's just throw the antibiotics at it to see what happens. I can't tell you the dozens, maybe hundreds of people now over my career who I've spoken to who were given antibiotics as a just in case, who developed bowel disease because of it. It was underlying issues, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And now they have a diagnosis of a chronic autoimmune condition from these guys. And had they not been given these as a just in case, they might be just fine today. And so I want to show you what some of these risks are. Because if we're going through most of these, like 30 to 40% is crazy. Like we're branching into half. Not even needed, to unresponsive things as a just in case. And so when you're dealing with this just in case with your doctor, I want to show you what some of these things are going to look like as far as risks, so you can make an informed decision. Informed decisions or informed consent with any kind of medical procedure does not come appropriately or effectively until you have the good, the bad, the ugly, and the maybes. Once you have that, then you can weigh the pros and cons, provided you understand the situation in its entirety. And so here are some risks that we can be looking at when we're dealing with things like antibiotic use. For the first one, we actually see a lot of resistance. We can see these in hospital as well. We'll see things like MRSA, known as MRSA. That's a methicillin-resistant staph bacteria. Really, really nasty, highly infectious, and very, very resistant. They're even seeing now antibiotic-resistant, what's what I'm looking for? It's meningitis. That's bacterial meningitis. We're seeing that get worse and worse as well. C. diff is another one that's growing and thriving in hospitals right now because of the heavy use of antibiotics. And so we have to watch for these resistances. We also see an increase. I'll put C. diff down here as well. And we're also seeing a lot of fungal overgrowth. Massive, massive fungal overgrowth. I forget what percentage, but there's something like 40+% of all diagnoses have an underlying fungal layer to them, whether it's asthma, heart disease, whatever, causing inflammation. And so we have to understand that fungus is an opportunistic microbe that lives in your gut. And when you take down the good guys with heavy doses of antibiotics, the fungus tends to overgrow. We have massive fungal infections, whether it's candida or something else. So we really have to watch for some of this stuff. We can also find that there are actually going to be drug interactions, and these can be really nasty as well. If you're having drugs interact, it's kind of like two rockets colliding and poof, there's a lot more damage than just one. And this ends up causing a lot of problems on a cellular level as well, nutrient deficiencies, etc. We do see a fair bit, not a ton, but we do actually see a fair bit of allergic reactions that can come from antibiotic use. We do want to watch for some of that. Because penicillin, how many people do you know are allergic to certain antibiotics? Maybe they weren't before. With all this, of course, comes major GI issues, but lastly, we do have something that we talk about that your doctor probably has never told you, antibiotic-associated diarrhea. Now, if you were here last week, we did go over this briefly, but I want to touch on it on this subject specifically. Antibiotic-associated diarrhea can happen anywhere between 5 to 25% of cases for those given antibiotics. And here's something your doctor never told you. 15% of the time, this can be fatal, meaning it can kill you. You can die, death by diarrhea. 5 to 25% of people can get this condition, up to 15% of them are fatal. But your doctor never said, hey, here's the information you need to know about us giving you antibiotics, here's the risk, would you like to take them? They say, just give it a whirl. They're generally considered safe. But these are very real risks we can look up. Everything from fungal infections to overgrowth to interactions, allergies, and freaking death by diarrhea. No. Now, not only are there risks in this regard, but they actually, because a risk is not like a guarantee, right? A risk is, well, there's a chance. You might be in the greater odds or the lower odds based on your risk factors, but here are some things that do happen to you when you're taking antibiotics. These are problems they actively create, okay? So I'm just gonna put up here problems. More antibiotics, more problems. So what we got here, number one, for sure, we're gonna have fungal overgrowth. That's almost a guarantee, or at least fungus is going to go beyond where it should be if it was properly controlled. And then of course, other things that'll break through, especially in the case of IBD, which are like C. diff infections. So we have a fair bit of those we wanna watch for. The next one we're gonna find is going to be immune responses. Now, your immune system can react for a lot of different reasons. You have certain microbes that actually help balance and keep your gut microbiome in check, right? Send signals and all kinds of stuff. 70 to 90% of your immune cells are made inside of your gut. Sometimes destroying microbes like bacteria is kind of like popping a balloon full of confetti. That confetti, all those proteins and toxins, everything living inside of that microbe goes everywhere. Now your immune system has to react to try to clean it up. So we can get weakened or impaired immune systems, and that lower diversity can also impact that immune production. Another thing they don't tell you it does, for those of you already with gut issues, that's why you're here watching and listening. You already have a gut issue, which creates leaky gut. Did you know that antibiotics also create or contribute to leaky gut? That's right. They break down your gut barrier and your gut barrier function within hours of consumption. And we can end up having is more systemic inflammation, right? When you have your gut, really between your small and your large intestine, your small intestine, this is your gut barrier, okay? One cell, which is about 1/50th the width of a strand of hair. It's very, very tiny. This is literally it. Inside your gut, you have poop floating around. There is one cell barrier, and that goes right into your bloodstream or your lymphatic system. One cell between your bloodstream and poop. And here's what happens. As these cells, your gut becomes inflamed, that gut barrier gets busted up, those cells actually spread apart. This is leaky gut. It's not necessarily always going to be poop that's coming in, but what's going to happen, you'll get certain toxins, you'll get microbes, you get large molecules of food that shouldn't be there, and suddenly you got food sensitivities. Oh, I can't eat chicken. It caused me a gut issue. I never used to. Or I've got some kind of sensitivity to cottage cheese or salmon, avocado. I never used to. That's because these large molecules are leaking into your blood. They're circulating around the body. Your immune system goes, whoa, you shouldn't be here. Attack it, red flags it. Next time it comes in, it says, yep, you've been a problem before. You're probably a problem now. Raise the alarms, and your immune system reacts. And so this leaky gut contributes to a lot of ongoing inflammation, systemic inflammation, and frankly, autoimmune disease. Leaky gut is one of the 3 pillars of autoimmune disease. And this is that inflammation cascade. In fact, there are 3 main pillars to autoimmunity we tend to see. So leaky gut is one. The second is going to be genetics. The third is going to be a trigger, also known as an antecedent. That can be a highly stressful event, a major infection, antibiotic use, whatever it is, leaky gut, and gene predispositions. These are all going to play a role to some degree. And so by creating leaky gut, you are putting one big layer of the autoimmune table into your body from antibiotics. But they didn't tell you that one either, though, did they? But now you know, and now you can make a better decision. The next one we tend to see a fair bit of is mitochondrial damage. What is mitochondria? Simply put, these are They're very popularly known as like the battery house of the cell. They do all kinds of amazing things for you. But without proper mitochondria, you would effectively die. That's really what's going to happen. Your body's not going to run, you're not going to detox, you're not going to have energy, you're not going to have a proper use of things like ATP and oxygenation in your body. You'll effectively get very, very sick and die over time. And so we need mitochondria. But here's what happens. When we take antibiotics, it actually disrupts mitochondrial DNA. So its own production of DNA to keep it healthy and keep it the way it is, it disrupts that. It actually impairs protein synthesis. The mitochondria cannot continue to rebuild themselves or repair themselves when they're damaged through stress, things that cause oxidative stress, like physical and mental, emotional, smoking, processed and refined fried foods. These oxidative stressors, you need your mitochondria to repair. But antibiotics actually inhibit that process. Now, I don't have a study on it, but here's what I can say, specific to mitochondria. Here's what I can say about this. There have been some amazing studies done where if you take ibuprofen at the time of an ankle injury, for example, and those tendons become damaged, if you stop that acute inflammatory response, it will never, ever repair back to the way it should. There are studies proving that. The studies I don't have, but I suspect if you have oxidative stress and damage, and you're destroying your mitochondria with antibiotics right at that time, I do suspect that you may not have the same repair in there as well. And so we have to be very, very careful understanding what's happening here. This can lead to all kinds of stuff. You get fatigue, detoxing issues. You can get neuropathies, which are neurological pains, muscle weakness pain. Again, we talked about oxidative stress. We're going to see some tendon ligament damage, even cardiac arrhythmias, which is going to be your heart palpitations changing. And I believe it's actually extended QRS or QT that we'll see. If you look at the heart arrhythmia, let me just bringing me back to cardiology from 10 years ago. What we end up looking at, you have the P, Q, R, S, all right? I know it's actually deeper, and then T. What happens, let me see, P, Q, R, S, and T. What happens, you end up having these longer, what we call QT intervals. So the time in the beat, boom, boom, when your heart goes lub-dub, through antibiotics can actually cause this to lengthen. And so you get this heartbeat, which can actually look kind of like this. And that can really cause a dysrhythmia and even in some cases lead to heart attacks. Antibiotics, weird, who would have thought? So that's a problem. And again, if we have leaky gut, we have worsened toxicity, we have poor mitochondria, which is going to lead to more toxins and less repair and less function, less everything, gut barrier function. Guess what? It's going to prolong chronic disease. So if you're someone with chronic disease and you're taking pharmaceutical grade antibiotics, you're actually prolonging your chronic disease. So we have to watch for that as well. Antibiotics are also very hard on certain organs. Your liver, we just mentioned the heart, and of course, your kidneys. So cardiac tissue and major detox and drainage organs, also leading to further toxicity. So it's a very, very big problem. But here's what they also don't tell you. Especially if you're given like runs of antibiotics within like multiple times in a year. I spoke to someone the other day who over the course of a year, for like 10 years, had something like 4 to 6 doses of antibiotics. It can take between 6 to 12 months to recover from a single dose of antibiotics, to recover your gut microbiome. And then there's everything else as a cascade from that, like mitochondrial damage. And so here's what we want to know. I want to show you what you can actually do about this. So I've just spent a long time droning on here about the damages and dangers of mitochondria. We just spent 15 minutes together, or of antibiotics. We just spent 15 minutes together talking about the risks and the dangers you were never told about antibiotics. And so what I want to do is walk you through what to do about it. My job is not to just scare you and leave you hanging, okay? Let's talk about what to do about this. If you are worried about antibiotics, the few things we can do to prepare you, because sometimes they're inevitable, so let's talk about that and we'll get to some alternatives. There are things you can do to prepare you to take antibiotics more safely. Remember, we already know that 30 to 40% of all antibiotic prescriptions are going to be unnecessary. So ask your doctor, do I need these? Like, am I gonna die without them? Really, like, it's a viral infection. Do antibiotics even work? Is it a just in case? Like, really ask them, grill them. If you're throwing antibiotics at me, I wanna know why. I had ankle surgery recently, and after a couple of days or a week, one of my tiny little incisions, one had a little infection, and I was actually doing a checkup for the doctor post-op, and he said, well, I'll give you some antibiotics for it if you want. I was like, well, can I do topical? He says, well, no, we want those topical ones to dry out, so let's go oral. I said, if I take oral, I got enough gut issues So I'd rather not if I can avoid it. He said, don't worry about it. It'll probably just dry up then and go away on its own. And it did. So a simple question in a conversation saying I'd rather not, I avoided just hammering my gut with more antibiotics. You have the power to do that. So just keep that in mind, okay? There's a couple things we can also do. Remember we talked about AAD, or antibiotic-associated diarrhea, which happens in 5 to 25% of all cases, and it's actually fatal in 15% of cases. Okay? AAD. There are studies showing that if you actually get antibiotic-induced or antibiotic-associated diarrhea, by taking high doses of both lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains of probiotics, it can actually reduce your chance of AAD by 54%. Just by taking these heavy-duty probiotics in high doses, tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, you can reduce your risk of diarrhea by 54% and actually protect your gut immensely. On top of that, these lactobacillus and bifido strains, they have a ton of protective, immune benefiting, immune boosting, gut lining reparative, anti-inflammatory properties. There's lots of great stuff. And so taking probiotics during antibiotic usage can help immensely. There are some speculations of, well, does it actually impact the effect of antibiotics? There's no really confirmation on it yet. So for me, this is where I go. Sometimes your body just needs a little boost. Sometimes you can get away without the antibiotics, and we're going to talk about that too, okay? So probiotics can be very, very helpful. We also talked about fungus. Well, there's another probiotic. It's a yeast called Saccharomyces boulardii. Is a yeast-based probiotic, really good for the immune system, the gut lining, and actually helps suppress the growth of fungus like Candida. And so 3 simple probiotics you can take. This one's pennies, like 5 billion CFUs, 10, 12 bucks for a bottle, pretty cheap. These ones, 20, 30 bucks, right? That's a whole month's supply. So that's usually going to be enough for you. And what we also want to do is support your gut lining and your GI health, okay? So that's what we want to do, support the gut lining and GI health. How can we do that? Well, GI health is going to be typical things, generally, right? Food, stress, exposure, sleep, exposure to microbes, nature, fresh air. That's going to really help the GI health. We have a ton of things we can actually take to promote your gut lining. So I'll put them on the side here. We can take certain like immunoglobulins. You can actually get bovine immunoglobulins or colostrum as a supplement. Just want to get as organic and clean as you can. We can get things like aloe vera. You can get slippery elm bark powder, which is going to be really nice for soothing and cooling that gut lining. Even marshmallow. You can get a marshmallow supplement as well, which is really going to help that, a marshmallow root. Sometimes even DGL, we call this a deglycerinated licorice root, can be very, very helpful. And the reason they go deglycerinated is plain licorice can sometimes boost blood pressure a little bit if you're sensitive to that. Glutamine, L-glutamine is another one that can really help. Zinc carnosine. And the reason we say carnosine, there's different forms of zinc, like zinc picolinate, zinc carnosine, etc. But zinc carnosine tends to have really nice benefits for the gut lining and helping rebuild some of that stuff as well. And then, of course, your probiotics have the gut lining benefits. So there's a lot of things we can take, collagen and bone broth, for example, for some people. But with IBD, I try to go low histamine. So if you have like a Crohn's colitis diagnosis, I'll typically avoid things like bone broth, but the rest are typically okay to do, just because we don't want to drive the histamine pathway. So this is supporting the gut lining. But I want to hit all the bases here. Remember, we talked about the damage that this does. We talked about the damage that your antibiotics do to mitochondria. So what can we do to actually help with your mitochondrial health? Those little battery powers that help you detox and repair and help you with everything that you need to basically not be a dead zombie. Well, a couple of things. So there are things like CoQ10 we can take, certain vitamins. There's another one called PQQ that you can get over the counter as well. Really good. That's a Q, not a 6. PQQ over the counter, which is really good for mitochondrial health and function as well. Basic things, NAC, N-acetylcysteine. This is a precursor for a powerful antioxidant known as glutathione, which can be really helpful. Different forms of magnesium can also be extremely helpful. And there's tons of them out there. If you go magnesium oxide or citrate, you'll probably poop. But things like bisglycinate, threonate, there's tons of them out there that you can get relatively affordably. Bisglycinate's typically the most absorbable, even if you're very sensitive to magnesium, can be a really good one. Another one we have is going to be ALA. That stands for alpha lipoic acid. And these are just good benefits for giving think of your body trying to repair. It just needs tools and resources. This is those tools and resources. Then we also have things like L-carnitine, which is going to be good. Vitamin C, D, and E are also very reparative for mitochondrial function. And we can also look at other things. Like if we have omega-3s for like cell membrane health, even coconut oil has some really nice acids and stuff in there as well. Antioxidants like resveratrol, or dark berries, like dark colors like blueberries, blackberries, that stuff. Antioxidants, these can be very reparative for your mitochondria. Right? So this is how we work back from the damage that's been caused. We go back to rebuilding the gut lining, go back to the probiotics, go back to the things that bring balance to your gut, repair the cells and the mitochondria in the cells that have been damaged. And this is how we begin repairing that damage done from antibiotic usage. But there's still another step we want to look at. I've repaired my damage, but what if I need them down the road? Then what do I do? Let's talk about that. So I'm going to give you some tools here that you can use as natural antibiotics. Now, disclaimer, this is not intended to substitute professional medical advice or treatment. It's for educational, informational purposes only. Now, that being said, please listen to your doctor, ask your doctor, etc. There's some really amazing studies. There was a teenager down in the US somewhere who did a study I've referenced before several times. I should know this off by heart now. But anyway, he compared, I believe it was amoxicillin or penicillin, one of the cillins, to oregano oil in a petri dish. And every single time, like doses were 1 to 100, oregano oil still won out. They're extremely powerful. And most of our antibiotics actually come from plants, and they're combined with patentable petroleum-based molecular structures. But plants are medicine. They're very, very powerful. And so I'm going to give you a big, long list. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you can get this list by just checking the links below. And I have a full list for you there, all the natural antibiotics, the risks of antibiotic usage, etc. You can easily find. But there are two products I really, really love that I'll put on there as well. One is called Nutricidin, and the other is Biocidin, either botanicals or nutraceuticals. They have very powerful blends and compounds that I'll often use, like their LSF compounds. But these are going to be combinations of things. Very, very many things. They're going to have all kinds of antibiotic herbs in there, things like oregano, like we mentioned. They're going to have thyme or red thyme, even things like, you can get lemon balm, grapeseed, even golden seal. And that's actually been used also in H. pylori, for example. There's a ton of stuff we can put in here. Manuka honey is a really powerful one, especially if you get a high grade Manuka honey. They get very expensive, but if you get like an MGO level under 500 is great for topical, even ingesting in small doses to help with that. Clove, another very powerful antimicrobial. So we can look at some of these guys. Tea tree, ginger, okay? Tea tree, you just gotta watch some of these, because if you have pets, like tea tree can be very hard on pets, eucalyptus can be hard on pets, even peppermint, mint can be very damaging for them as well, so watch that. Black cumin, this one is ancient, goes back thousands of years with Ayurveda. It's actually been written in all kinds of ancient like religious texts as well about black cumin, so you can look for that one as well. Black walnut is another powerful antifungal and antimicrobial. So here's the thing, this is a partial list of what's available out there, but look what we have. Massive amounts of natural herbs and plants that can actually be antifungal, antimicrobial, and kill things off. And again, if you're on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you can get my list down below in the notes, and there'll be a link there for you to be able to download this. So make sure you do get a chance to grab that. Here's what I want to wrap up with. 30 to 40% of all antibiotic prescriptions are completely unnecessary. 100% of them are going to be damaging in some way, shape, or form. If they're life-saving, then you need them. If they're just precautionary or I don't know what if, ask questions and make sure, okay? Because you might have a chance to fully avoid all this remarkable damage that it's doing to your immune system, your gut lining, your cells, your mitochondria, all of that. So there's a lot of ways around that, especially if you go the natural route. So I'm going to turn over to the comment section now. So let me see, who have we got here? Let me see, Tammy, it says, I can't read the name of probiotic, just came off antibiotics for bronchitis. Also looking for the tools and resources. Do put coconut oil in coffee and vitamin C and zinc. I'll try to decipher that, Tammy, just because the question wasn't super clear. But the probiotics I'm recommending, I'll give them to you guys one more time. That is your lactobacillus and bifidobacteriums. Now there's many different strains under those species umbrellas, but we'll just call them for short form. We're gonna say lacto, and we'll say bifido, and then again, a Saccharomyces boulardii, or SAC-B, I call it for short. Those are very, very powerful. Now I've been asked as well about like mixing things in coffee. I know Stephen Gundry put out a thing a while back. If you mix dairy in coffee, it takes away this nutrient. I don't care. I'm not going to micromanage every aspect of my life for like optimizing my nutrients. A lot of this stuff is clickbait and headlining. Well, if you mix this with coffee, you know, taking nutrients from your body. You're not. You'll get them somewhere else. Don't worry about it. So mix your coffee how you please. You want to do a coconut oil and butter in your coffee? Have at it. As long as your liver can handle the fat, I have no issue with that. And other vitamins and stuff will get you that full list as well. Cassie says, if you take any of these you listed for antibiotic alternative use, don't they kill everything like regular antibiotics? Amazing question, Cassie. Great question. Long answer short, no, they don't. Here's the thing. Everything that we'll present with you, you can find a study and literature on both sides. I actually had an argument with a microbiologist in a group on a Reddit, and then they removed me because they didn't like what I had to say. But it's all cited information. There's just as many articles to say taking plant-based also kills everything, as it is to say taking plant-based spares the good, even supports and helps them thrive while controlling the bad. If you're taking them long-term, well, now you're supplementing, now you're looking at issues. But in my experience with the hundreds of people, Crohn's, colitis, we've now helped reverse. Other digestive issues we've helped reverse. Personal use, things I recommend in my family. Even the doctors that I work with on a regular basis, they recommend these as well, and the outcomes are always better, nearly 100% of the time, unless it's an emergency situation. So to answer your question, no. We find that, especially in practice, though evidence supports both sides, in practice, we actually see the tangible outcomes to be more beneficial when we're taking plant-based. That they do kill off the bad while sparing the good much of the time and even supporting them because they have a lot of other benefits, whereas the pharmaceutical grade just tend to kill everything in their entirety. Those are great questions though, guys. Here's the thing. Is good or is natural better than pharmaceutical? Not 100% of the time. If it's life-saving, you need it. If it's just precautionary, go natural, because at least you know you're moving without guaranteeing the damage. If you have something minor that you feel like, hey, like my body might be able to deal with itself, great. Get a natural antibiotic and take that, or put it topically on top of that, whatever the situation may be. Those are great ways to go about it. We have any questions over on that side? So we had a good question about some very specific cases of inflammation. If you're using baby probiotics, that's as good as it can get. When you're giving antibiotics, or you have bacterial infections or inflammatory infections and conditions for children, a lot of these things don't taste awesome. They're very, very bitter. But antibiotics taste like garbage too. And sometimes they're big pills to swallow, or they'll put them in liquids. A lot of the things we can get in liquid forms. But oftentimes I've had parents in with autistic children, with very young children who have all kinds of flavor issues. And a lot of the times the liquid versions can be mixed into stuff and you don't really notice. And that's always a good way to go as well. So just keep that in mind. If there are very specific inflammatory conditions, especially if they're chronic, not like an immediate bacterial issue, we have to still get to the root cause. But sometimes, like for systemic stuff, this supplement, Biocidin, LSF, can be very, very powerful. Be very careful. And again, I'll get you guys a link if you request for that. But these can be very, very powerful in dealing with systemic infections. One of the doctors I work with, brilliant functional medicine doctor, Dr. Salibi, he had this thing that would pop up once in a while. It was some kind of localized infection on his elbow. For whatever reason, he had a cyst would pop up, and it was always an infection and inflamed. You get it biopsied, and there's bacteria in there. And he'd take 2 pumps of this morning and night, a couple of times a day, a couple of days, and it was gone. Whereas antibiotics just wrecked his system and didn't really take care of the issue. So there's all kinds of different alternatives out there. We just have to know the tools. Unfortunately, our doctors just have a very limited tool chest. And so we can reduce what they give us to things that we want to use and reduce the risk of that up to 40%, then you're going to be in better hands. So that's all we got for questions for now, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Here's what I want to do for you, though. Don't leave empty-handed. Make sure that we're going to get you those lists if you need help with these. We're going to get you that list. And if you're here on YouTube or listening on the podcast, make sure you check the links below. But ultimately, nothing in our bowels has to be what our doctors think it is. Your doctor says it's genetic. They treat every condition like it's genetic. Even heart disease and Alzheimer's have been saying for decades, well, it's genetic or it's your cholesterol. It's not. Did you know when you have infections in your gut, they produce these toxins which go around your body? Your body actually produces extra cholesterol on purpose to bind to these toxins, to neutralize them, to protect you, which ends up over time as toxins leak, the cholesterol then builds up and turns to plaque and hardens. We go, oh look, cholesterol is a problem. No, the toxins were the issue. Cholesterol was defensive. It just used so much defense because you never fixed the problem. None of these conditions are permanent like you've been told for decades. And so it's a very simple solution to get yourself some help. That's all we got for you guys tonight. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.